resenting the wealth gap is not legitimate. And it's not okay. If you will give me a chance, I can walk you there. And at the very least, today's episode will be interesting. So I hope you're willing to hear me out. But before I get to the really good part that conclusively makes this point, I do have to lay some groundwork. So, if you are not a Christian or a Jew, if you're not in one of those two categories, and by that I mean a practicing Christian or a practicing Jew, someone who actually lives in that way, then this is not going to carry as much weight for you, but it's still a pretty interesting look into how those people think and the advantages of that. So it might be a learning experience that's still worth taking, even if you don't put some sort of divine weight behind it as though that conclusively decides the matter. If you are a practicing Jew or a practicing Christian, I want to start with the third commandment. You remember Moses went up Mount Sinai. God gave him 10 commandments. If you're a practicing Christian or a practicing Jew, that carries weight with you. You believe this is the Word of God. You say you believe the Word of God. You say you are a follower of God. Christian means little Christ, means I'm following Him. He is my teacher. He is my Savior. I model my life after Him. Is that true? Let's start with the third commandment. You can find this in Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Now, if you're a practicing Jew, you probably already have a handle on what I'm about to say. If you're a practicing Christian, this is going to come as a bit of a surprise, because you've no doubt been told your whole life that this means don't cuss. It does not mean that. Now, if you were to stretch what it actually means really far, it would include don't disrespect God's name by taking God's name and turning it into a cuss or using it flippantly and disrespectfully. But that would be on the furthest edge. It's completely missing the heart of what this command is about. And as for other cuss words, sure, there are other verses in the Bible that talk about certain kinds of language that you should avoid, but this ain't that. Okay, if you were taught that this commandment means you're not supposed to cuss, I hate to break it to you, you were taught wrong. Let's look at this verse in its original Hebrew. First of all, the word is not take. The word is to carry off. It's to seize it, snatch it up, carry it off. You are not to carry off the name Shem, which is, Jews do not use the actual name of God, Yahweh, and if you're Jewish, I'm not trying to be disrespectful right now, I'm trying to be precise. Jews do not speak that name. Therefore, they use the word Hashem, the name. They do not pronounce the name of God. The text is talking about the name of God, Yahweh. But when it says, you shall not carry off Yahweh's name, name is more than just Yahweh. Your name is your reputation. It is your identity. It is the way you are known by other people. In certain contexts, that may even extend long-term, as in a legacy, the way that you're remembered. But while you are alive, it is your reputation. You are not to carry off God's reputation. Once again, it is Yahweh, your God. So Yahweh is the first word. Elohim is God. Elohim is based on the word El, mighty, and it indicates creator. It's a plural word, and therefore it indicates a multifaceted creator, because we know that God is one. The Bible says the Lord is God, the Lord is El, the Lord is one. So he's Elohim, he's plural, but he's one. So we know it's not actually being used as a plural, as in there are many gods, even though if you use this word in any other context, that's what it would mean. It means God is multifaceted as the creator. So you are not to carry off Yahweh, the mighty, multifaceted creator's reputation, in vain. Okay, the word there is not in. The word there is for. What is vain? Is it talking about vanity? Nope, not that kind of vain. It's talking about the kind of vanity that more akin to what Solomon was talking about in Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, meaning futility of futilities, meaninglessness of meaninglessness. It is talking about something that is empty, false, futile, and worthless. Aha, we now have the commandment. You are not to carry off the reputation of Yahweh, the mighty, multifaceted creator, for emptiness, worthlessness, falseness, and futility. Why? Because, that is what the word for there is, because the Lord will not leave unpunished anyone who takes his name in vain. Because Yahweh will not acquit, clear of the charges, wipe them out, as though the guilt no longer exists. There's somewhat of a connotation of forgiveness. And ultimately, because these judicial terms encompass the entire thing, from the trial to the sentence, the trial to the conviction to the sentence, it is, he will not erase the case, he will not acquit you of the crime of guilt of which you are guilty, and leave you unpunished. For anyone who carries off his name, his reputation, for emptiness, falsehood, and worthlessness. Okay, so why is that important? Because we have to start there. If you are going to call yourself a Christian and say you believe that the Word of God is the Word of God, when the rubber meets the road and your instincts for morality say one thing because of the culture you live in, and the text that you believe to be the Word of God says something else, you have declared you are following God. Doesn't mean you're following Him blindly. It means He has a better track record for accuracy than you do. So are you following God or not? We have a lot of people in our culture, and this is going to sound harsh, but today's subject matter requires a little bit of harshness, who do this very thing without being called out by actual Christians, who act like Hannibal Lecter, peel off the security guard's face, in this case, Jesus' face, plaster it over their own ideas, and declare those empty ideas of their own to be God's idea. That is exactly what this is forbidding. And unlike some of the other commandments, it actually adds a punishment in there. You aren't going to be cleared of this. There's going to be consequences. You won't be cleared until the punishment has been suffered. That is an extreme form of blasphemy. Now, you're allowed to have your own ideas. You are not allowed to hijack God's reputation for them. If you have an idea, you need to present it as your idea. I believe. That's fine. When you say, and if Jesus was here, Jesus would do, you are on thin ice. I'm speaking the truth to you now, one Christian to another, because you are dangling over a very deep pit with some very severe consequences in it, balanced on a spider web thin thread. I am trying to help you out here, because this is very easy to do, myself included. It's very easy to say, this is my idea. My idea is moral from my perspective. God is moral. Therefore, God would support it. Therefore, there's really nothing wrong with claiming that God believes what I believe. That is not following God. That is you looking in the mirror and creating an idol out of you. That is you picturing yourself in first century robes, adding a beard, tattooing the name Jesus on your own forehead and worshiping that and calling it Christianity. Okay, if you actually follow Jesus, it has to be the one in the Bible. The parts of Him that you like, the parts of Him that shock you a little bit, the parts of Him that maybe you disagree with, has to be the whole thing. Are you following or not? Now, assuming that you are, well, let me back up one step. We're going to look at one other verse. Proverbs 21:27. And then we'll get into the meat of today's actual subject, now that the groundwork has been laid. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. How much more when he brings it with evil intent? This is a really fascinating verse. Okay? So, this is talking about a blood sacrifice. Blood was connected to life. Your life is in the blood. So this is a life-filled sacrifice. This is not like a grain offering. This is a slaughtered sheep or bird or cattle, depending on where you fit in on the wealth spectrum. But it's a life-filled sacrifice that is made by the wicked. The word here is a bad, guilty person. And I don't mean guilt as in they feel guilty. It doesn't matter how they feel. They're guilty as in they are a criminal. They did it. They are guilty. They've been tried. They're guilty. There is a connotation of also being hostile and unjust, but the main connotation is that they are the guilty, bad person in the wrong. So when that kind of person, they're guilty of a crime, and God is saying, taking His name in vain here is a crime. When that kind of person makes a life-filled sacrifice, they are going through the outward motions of compliance. It is viscerally revolting. That's what the word abomination means. And in most other verses, it'll say it's an abomination to God. This verse doesn't say that. It says it's an abomination. Which, that shift implies it's not only just viscerally revolting to God, which it is. We have that from other verses. But it's implying, by not putting to God in this part of the verse, that there's just something instinctive in your fellow human being that's revolted by you at this point. God is repulsed by it. So is your fellow man. How much more so when he, the wicked person, brings it, the sacrifice, with evil intent. This is where it gets really interesting. So, how much more so? This could also be translated as an emphatic. It really is worse when on top of that, he, the wicked person, the bad, guilty person in the wrong, brings it, his sacrifice, with evil intent, is actually with calculated lewdness and depravity as part of malicious, corrupt, and harmful intentions or plans. It's not just the word ra, which is the malicious, corrupt, and harmful part. It's connected to a word meaning intentions and plans, but that word also contains within it the word lewd or depraved. So this verse is indicating that when your life does not align with your sacrificial gestures, God is repulsed by that. People are repulsed by that. But when you actually try to bribe God, that would be the sacrifice part, as though he is as corrupt as you are, or you use him as part of a performance for others in order to forward a premeditated agenda, that is just a whole other level of lewd. And I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm trying to say some truths in love that need to be said. We have an awful lot of people with fishes on their bumper sticker and crosses around their neck who run around doing this on a daily basis. And that is a really lewd contradiction to what they claim to be. Now, why do I point this out? This is all the framework for what I'm about to get into today. I started out by making a statement that the wealth gap, the whole idea of wealth inequality, resenting that is not legitimate. It's not right. I will add to that now, it's none of your business. Why did I preface what I'm about to say with the whole taking God's name in vain part? Because either you're a Christian or you're not. You either are willing to defer to the teachings of Christ or you're going to keep to your own. Now, if you're not a Christian, like I said, this is more of what is the benefit of being raised this way? Almost everybody in our secular society is talking about the wealth gap. There are those who are kind of apologizing for it as though, look, I'm a capitalist, I love capitalism, but I understand why people are upset about the inequality. And so it is legitimate and we need to figure this out. And then you have people that are just full-on communists that are saying, no, I'm not capitalist. I think that the wealth gap is pure evil, that everything should be redistributed. But either way, whichever group you're in, nobody is saying this particular beef is bullshit. Now, to be very clear, I am not talking about being concerned about poverty. If you have somebody that can't feed themselves, I'm not saying that that is bullshit. If you have someone who is homeless and can't keep a roof over their head and living in exposed elements, I'm not saying that being concerned about that is illegitimate. I'm talking about the wealth gap. So you have a roof over your head, you have food on your table, you have everything that you need to survive. In fact, you probably, almost certainly, have many luxuries as well. You have streaming services, you have devices, you have air conditioning, you have enough money to go out to eat now and again. You are not maybe wealthy, but that's what the wealth gap is. It's not saying I'm poor, it's saying I am what I am and you have more than me and I'm not okay with you having more than me. That's what I'm saying is illegitimate. Okay, so let's get into the meat of why, if you are a Christian or a Jew, a practicing Christian or a Jew, you cannot take that sort of a position. I'm going to show you why. And if you are not a practicing Christian, I'm going to show you the benefits of being steeped in a standard of morality as opposed to making one up on your own. In the Gospel of John, chapter 21, is where you can find this story. Jesus has been crucified. He's risen from the dead. Peter, my favorite disciple because he's the most relatable. Man is forever putting his foot in his mouth. Every time he opens it, open mouth, insert foot. But God love him. He means well. And he is used by God in an amazing role. Okay? Peter gets a hard time, but he did a lot of amazing things that many of the other disciples did not do. He was the only one that got out of the boat, man, when they were on the water. Okay? You can judge him for doubting and starting to sink, fair enough, but the others didn't even get out. Peter's having a hard time. Why? The last meal that he had with Jesus, he told him, I would die for you. If they try to kill you, I will go to my death with you. And here's the thing, Peter actually meant it. He was not being a big mouth. That is who he honestly thought he was. He thought he had it in him to stand by Jesus in death. He did, because he was that passionate about him, and he thought his passion would carry him through. And Jesus told him at that meal, Peter, the sun is not even going to rise. The cock is not even going to crow 3 times before you deny that you even know me 3 different times. And Peter cannot accept that. That does not mesh with what he knows about himself. He's like, no, if I die with you, I would never deny that I know you. I've traveled with you for 3 years. I've abandoned my whole life to follow you. I'm completely devoted to you. He believed it, people. And when the moment came, and there's a mob, and he's watching them beat Jesus, and there is no way out, and he realizes they're going to kill him. I cannot believe this is happening. They're going to kill him. He decides, I need to get out of here. The mob is turning ugly. I need to get out of here. And people start to recognize him. They're like, hey, we've seen you with him. You're one of his disciples. No, I'm not. I don't know him. I don't know who he is. Another person is like, yeah, I've seen you with him. Besides, you've got a Galilean accent. Who do you think you're fooling, man? It's like, I don't know who he is. I wandered in here. I just wanted to see what was going on. I don't know that man. Gets grabbed a 3rd time. don't pull this. Don't gaslight me, man. I've seen you with him. You're one of his disciples. And he basically cusses him out. Damn you, I am not. He's scared out of his mind. He is scared out of his mind. This is an ugly mob. And they're fixing to kill somebody that he thought was going to be king. And in that moment, on his third denial, rooster crows. And Jesus looks up into his eyes. And Peter remembers what Jesus told him. And the combination of not being the type of person that he thought he would be. You think you would hide Anne Frank or something, and it turns out not only would you maybe not hide her, you might not even be the person who kept his mouth shut. You might actually say, you know what, I don't want to risk it. I'll actually phone the secret police. Okay, this is the kind of horrifying self-shattering that Peter had in this moment. And he's looking into the eyes of a man who is about to die. Somebody that he did love, knowing in your worst moment, in your moment of death, I betrayed you like Judas. It broke Peter. And he left, and it says he went out and he wept bitterly. So when Jesus was resurrected, Peter was struggling. He's not who he thought he was. This betrayal is hanging in the air between him and Jesus. Not that Jesus is holding it against him, but it's hanging in the air because Peter doesn't know how to deal with it. And they've just had a meal on the beach. And Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And Peter sincerely tells him, yes, I do. And you know, he has to be thinking, and I meant it before. I was scared. I didn't think that's who I was. I was scared. It doesn't mean I don't love you. I know it seems like I don't. Because how could I love you and do that to you? But I do love you. And each time he says that he loves him, Jesus says, okay, then do something for me. Feed my sheep. This is Jesus telling him what his life's mission is going to be, to build the church. Jesus gives him an opportunity for every denial for which he beats himself up for, to restate who he is, to take on a new identity, not of the denier and the betrayer, but of the devoted disciple who loves his master. And then Jesus has something else to tell Peter. He says, truly, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you, clothe you, and bring you where you do not wish to go. And he said this signifying what kind of death, by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had said this, he said to him, follow me. So what is going on here? Jesus says, Peter, I'm not holding it against you, man. You are restored to this relationship with me. You're not the denier. You are my disciple, the disciple who loves me, with whom I am trusting to build my church. And you know what? You thought you had it in you to go to the cross with me. And you're wrestling with who you really are right now, because it turns out you didn't. You were so scared of that horrible death, rightly so, that you did something you didn't think you were capable of in order to avoid the cross. And Peter, I'm just letting you know right now, you aren't going to avoid the cross, man. You are going to die on that cross. And you know what? It's going to be okay because you do have it in you. And he sums all of that up by saying, follow me. That's what discipleship is. It's a follow me moment. Now, Peter is understandably a little taken back by this. Okay, first of all, he's had a huge responsibility. Well, first of all, he's addressed a very tender, fresh trauma. Second, he's been given an enormous responsibility to build the church. And third, the death that he most feared, the one that broke him, the fear of this death was what broke him last time, is ultimately going to be his fate. And indeed, Peter was eventually crucified. This is not what you want to hear, man. I mean, I'm just telling you, okay? People have a tendency to try to romanticize and pedestalize the people in the Bible, but they were very human people if you've read the Bible. And this is not what Peter wants to hear. And so what is his response? His response is to go, what about John? What about John? Okay, now John was the youngest disciple. He may not have even been more than a teenager, which is why Jesus had a special fatherly relationship with him. He was called the disciple that Jesus loved. You know, he'd sit there with his arm around him. He's young. So he's the favorite, right? He's the favorite. And Peter's like, that's not fair. Okay, I get a big job, and I'm going to die a horrible death. What about John? Okay, what about John? I want to know what's going to happen to John, because this better be equal, man. And you know what Jesus tells him? John is not your business, Peter. If I want John to live till the end of time, till I come back in the apocalypse, guess what, Peter? That ain't your business. Peter's business is Peter. The relationship between Jesus and Peter does not have a single thing to do with the relationship between Jesus and John. The relationship between Jesus and John is an A and B conversation. See your way out of it. There are actually boundaries put down in the teachings of Christ, and one of them is some things are your business and some things are not. And if someone is stealing from you, that's your business. If they just happen to have more than you and they did not get that by taking anything from you, it's just that they have a bigger piece of cake than you do, that ain't your business. These sort of teachings are reiterated throughout the Bible. This is a clear-cut example of it, but you see it in the Old Testament when it talks about that a man is to enjoy the products of what he produces, that no one is to take away the fruits of his labor from him. And you know what? If his labor produces more fruit, that's no skin off your nose. He didn't steal it out of your field. Okay? The reason that you have less than him is not because he took from you. You have what you have based on what you did. What he has is not your business. You see this again when Jesus says, people say that the father's eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth will be set on edge, and I say, no, you don't get to punish the kids for the sins of the father. Nope, everybody has to be responsible for themselves. We're not doing the whole reparations for past sins and punishing the innocent for the crimes that you've decided they're guilty of by association. Not how it works. You either have to punish the criminal or you missed your chance. You don't get to punish his children or his grandchildren. Everybody's responsible for themselves. And there's a teaching that directly illustrates this that is incredibly beautiful. Jesus himself is speaking. This is Matthew 20. He's telling a parable. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you say, I subscribe to the teachings of Jesus. He's my teacher. I follow him. Great. Lesson 1. He tells a story. There's a man. He has a field. Big field. Lots of harvest. Harvest needs to be brought in. Okay. He needs workers. Goes out into the streets and he says, does anybody want a job? I will pay you a good wage. I'm offering a good wage for a good day's work. Does anybody want to work? And there's several men who go, I want to work. I want to work. If you'll pay me a good wage, I want to work. And he's like, great. You're hired, man. Go out into the field. There you go. At the end of the day, I will pay you a good wage. Great. By noon, he realizes we don't have enough men. We're not getting this in today. Okay, I need more workers. He goes back into town. Different people on the streets. And he says, does anybody want a job? I need workers out in my field. I will pay you a good wage for your work. Does anybody want to take me up on that? And several men go, I want a job. Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, great. There's people already out there in the field. You go out in the field, join them, work away. End of the day, I'm going to give you a good wage. By the end of the day, got an hour left to work. He realizes we do not have enough men. We're not getting this all done today. Goes back into town, goes out in the streets, different people on the streets. He says, I will pay you a good wage for your work. Do you want a job? Because I need workers out in my field, man. And several people say, I will take you up on that, man. If you're offering a good wage, I'll absolutely work my tail off. Go ahead. He says, all right, go out there. You work away. And at the end of the day, I'm going to pay you a good, fair wage. End of the day comes. They get the harvest and everybody's happy. It's wonderful. And this man goes up to the first group and he says, you know what? You did a good job. You worked hard all day. You got it in. I promised you a good wage. Here's a good wage. And it was a good wage. They got a good deal. The story should have ended there, but Jesus wants to show the problem with human morality. We are not good at limiting ourselves, and yet there needs to be limits. So he goes to the second group. They've been working for half a day. And he says, you did good work. You got my harvest in. I appreciate it, man. I told you I'd pay you good. I'm going to pay you good. Here's your wage. And it was the same amount that he gave to the first people. And then he goes to the last group, and they've only worked an hour. And he says, you know what? You guys worked hard for that hour, and I appreciate it. You got my harvest in. I told you I'd give you a good wage. Here you go. And he gives them the same amount. Now suddenly the first group is unhappy. They've got a good wage, and that should have been the end of it, until they decided that other people's business was their business. And then resentment sets in. And they say, look, man, we worked all day. Those people worked half a day. And those people worked 1 freaking hour. And they got the same amount we did. That ain't right. That ain't fair. You owe us more. And he says to them, excuse me, what deal did we have? I made a deal with you. Come work, and I will give you a good wage. Did I give you a good wage? Yes, I did. What I do with them is none of your business. It actually is not. If I want to be generous with them and give them as much as you, if I want to be extra generous with them and give them more than you, if I want to go out on the street to a beggar who did nothing and give him the most of all, that's my money. You do not get to dictate how I treat other people. Your business is about how I treated you. I promised you a good wage. I gave you a good wage. That is where your right to have any issue ends. What they were given did not come out of your pocket. It came out of my pocket, my money. And I have the right to give my money in whatever amount to whoever I want to, for whatever reason I want to, and I don't need your vote on it. Thank you very much. This is not your business. Now, in today's world, we would say the workers were right. That's not fair. Guess what? Fair is not the goal. Moral is the goal. He did not wrong those workers. He promised them a good wage. He gave them a good wage. That is where their right to a beef ends. Now, if he had cheated them, they would have a legitimate beef. If he had not paid them a good wage, they would have a legitimate beef. If he took some of their wages and gave it to someone else, robbing Peter to pay Paul, that would be their business. But he did what he was supposed to do with them. He treated them well. It was only because they started comparing. It's a relativity thing that they decided they got a bad deal. If those other workers had never been hired and they had put in a full day's work and had gotten that denarii, that good day's pay, they would have been perfectly happy. It was only the comparison that was not actually their business, that made them unhappy. What is the wealth gap other than a comparison? What is wealth inequality other than a comparison? Now look, if you don't have enough to live on, you're going to starve or something. You're exposed to the elements. Okay, like I said before, that's different. That's not about wealth inequality. That is about poverty. Poverty is legitimate. There are examples in Scripture of take care of the poor. But once again, that's not about wealth equality either. For example, in the Old Testament, if you owned fields and you're gathering in your harvest, or you owned vineyards and you're gathering in that crop, you have to leave the corners of your field unharvested. Why? For the widows, the orphans, and the poor. So there are commands for social safety nets so that people don't starve. But I hate to break it to you people. The Bible did not say half of your field needs to be left unharvested. That way, what the widow gets is equal. That way, there is no wealth gap between what you, as the farmer, produced and what the widow, who, because she could not work in the fields, was not able to produce. But we want everyone to have equal. That way, there's no wealth gap. It never said that. It never came anywhere close to that. It said, no, we don't want her to starve, but she doesn't actually have a right to equal wealth for unequal work. Now, it's not necessarily her fault that you can't work. Women weren't allowed to work. It's not a judgment on her. It's just a reality. The farmer was out in those fields every day producing those crops. They are his. She does not have a right to equal produce for unequal work. We don't want her to starve either, which is why it was not about the wealth gap. It was not about wealth inequality. It was about, we're going to make sure that you don't fall through the cracks and die. We're going to leave the corners unharvested for you. But it was not about redistribution so that everybody wound up with the same amount. People can be angry that Elon Musk is now a trillionaire. And obviously that doesn't mean he has $1 trillion in the bank. It means that were he to sell everything he owned, it would add up to $1 million. Okay, it doesn't mean that he has access to $1 trillion. All right. Tell me how many of those dollars came out of your pocket. No, seriously, I mean, when your boss paid you, and it's like X amount is taken out for federal taxes, X amount is taken out of state taxes, X amount is taken out for Social Security, X amount is taken out for Elon Musk. How much was that? As a matter of fact, His wealth generated wealth for others. There are thousands of his workers, including cafeteria ladies, who are now millionaires. There's more than 100 of them who are now billionaires for working with him. So his wealth has not been entirely selfish. It has generated not only products, but also wealth for other people, for his employees. Once again, how did that lunch lady becoming a millionaire take anything out of your pocket? It did not. It is a matter of you just saying, yeah, but it's not equal. Well, I am sorry. I know it's a cliche. Life isn't fair. And by the way, how many times have you lived at your office around the clock for months at an end? So why are you supposed to be getting equal outcomes to Elon Musk when you are not putting in equal work to Elon Musk? How many companies have you generated? How much products do you invent and put out into the world that people want to buy? Like, why are you supposed to actually have an equal amount to him, other than just other people tell you that is the way the world is supposed to work? And this is why I say secular people are at a major disadvantage here in life. They don't have this framework. So when somebody tells them the wealth gap, resent the rich, all this sort of stuff, it sounds okay. I mean, equality is good when it comes to rights. So, equality probably is good when it comes to redistribution. We'll just ignore what that actually has looked like every single time it's been tried under communism. We'll just forget the breadlines, the starving people, the gulags, the dictators, 100 million people dead, they probably weren't doing it right. We can do it right. And we should, because that's actually a good thing. We'll ignore the fact that there never was even equality under communism, because some people were more equal than others. You had your Stalins living in palaces with all of the wealth, and then everyone else was poor. So there was a massive wealth gap under communism too, but we're going to ignore that. It was just that it was all concentrated among even fewer people, and the people that were all poor, and there were so many more people that were poor under communism than poor under capitalism, they didn't even have a chance to climb up and enrich themselves. But we're going to ignore that too. Let's ignore it. Just ignore it. There's nothing behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. I am the great and powerful Oz. This sort of stuff works because you don't have a standard of morality that you're seeped in. Okay, people talk about privileges. There is no greater privilege than Christian privilege or Judaism. If you are privileged enough to grow up in a home where these stories are taught, and so you see the same idea in the Old Testament as they're coming into the Promised Land, through the stories of David and the middle of the Old Testament, you see these attitudes of a lack of entitlement among the prophets. You see Jesus reiterating them in the New Testament. More stories being told, examples of him telling his disciples, not your business. If you're steeped in that, you are way less susceptible to this stuff. You just are. Because you have agreed that this is the version of morality that you are signing on to. So once again, it's about not taking God's name in vain. If you're saying you're a Christian, then you're saying you agree with Christian teachings. The things I showed you today are Christian teachings, repeated over and over in the Bible as absolute. Nuh-uh. Don't do that. Not allowed. Not okay. Envy, not okay. Resentment, not okay. Being concerned about everybody else's business, unless it actually takes from you, not a business. Worry about you. That is the great thing about Judaism and Christianity. It is 100% about, don't worry about the speck in your brother's eye. Worry about the beam in your own eye. You are responsible for fixing your flaws, not other people's flaws. You are responsible for working your soil, meeting your responsibilities, building your family. You are not responsible for how everybody else is doing. You are responsible for working hard and trying to build a good life. You are not in the business of monitoring, but he got more than me. What? Did it come from you? Is his excess something that he stole from your land? No, then it's not your business. If you are a practicing Christian or a practicing Jew, and you are giving validity to the wealth gap, wealth inequality narrative, you are blatantly contradicting the teachings that you claim you believe in. Now, once again, to be clear, just to do the land acknowledgement over and over and over again here, I am not talking about being concerned about poverty. I'm not talking about participating in charity. I am not talking about social safety nets. Of course, we do not want people starving. That was why the fields' corners were left ungleaned. Of course, we want charity. There are many laws in the Old Testament, which is considered so brutal for its laws. There were many laws regarding charity and charitable treatment towards others, like leaving the corners of your fields unharvested, like providing to the temple workers and stuff. So, your scholars. But there was also some clear boundaries of this is your business and this is not. If you have a piece of cake and no one has taken your piece of cake, and that person way over there has got a bigger piece of cake, it did not come from you. It did not make your piece of cake any smaller. It's just bigger than yours. That is none of your business. It is not. It is immoral to think that it is. It is entitled to think that it is, and that is not a legitimate beef. Now, if you're starving and you say, I not only don't have cake, I don't have food, I'm starving, I need some help, that's a legitimate problem, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't care about the poor. I'm not even saying that we shouldn't try to make everyone wealthier. Give everyone the opportunities to make the most that they can of their life. But this idea that the only outcome that is acceptable is everybody being equal, first of all, that always leads to a communist hell. Second of all, that aside, it is not a legitimate beef. There are people that have less than you. You didn't take from them to get what you have. You have what you have. It didn't cost them anything. That's true for the people above you too. Unless they exploited you, unless they stole from you, unless they did not pay you the wages that you agreed to, etc., 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 unless you have been directly wronged. And if you have, that is a legitimate beef, and I will stand up with you for it. But if it was no skin off of your nose, it did not cost you anything, you're just resentful because they have more than you. Without taking anything away from you, they just ended up with more. By the biblical morality, that puts you in the wrong. That puts you in the wrong. You are the one that is trying to get something that you do not actually earn, that is based off of entitled resentment, and is an unhealthy attitude that is going to poison your life more than anyone else's. And that's ultimately what this comes back around to. The secular morality of make it up and decide for ourselves as we go, totally untethered from the roots in the soil that produced the most successful, wealthiest civilizations on Earth, not to mention the most successful, technologically advanced, able to lift other countries that were struggling out of poverty, improve the lives of their people, even those that are still living in dire circumstances are better off than the people in that country 100 years ago. Sorry about that. The fact that there is a wealth gap, the fact that a gap exists, is not a legitimate gripe. If somebody's taking food off your plate, that's a legitimate gripe. If somebody promised to put food on your plate and did not, that's a legitimate gripe. You did work for them and they did not pay you, that's a legitimate gripe. If you worked hard and were walking home and someone stole the money from you, mugged you, and took it out, that's a legitimate gripe. Okay, I'm not saying there are no legitimate gripes in the world. I'm saying to say a gap exists and I don't like gaps, that is not a legitimate gripe. And it is time in this world to start calling out the legitimate gripes from the illegitimate gripes. Ours is the most successful advanced civilization to ever live, including the wealthiest. And it grew in the soil of this morality. All of the founders, even the ones who were not Christians on a personal level, grew up and lived their entire lives going to church every Sunday, being immersed in these teachings. The teachings that moored you to a standard of morality. When you start to get a little envious and it's like, oh, and today we're reading this story about like Peter pointing at John. Like, what about John? Is John going to be crucified too? Not your business, Peter. Oh. Yeah, I kind of needed to hear that today, because here I am sitting there, basically saying the same thing to Mom about my brother. Like, what about him? Is he grounded too? That's not my business. We actually need to quit catering to a premise that is unhealthy to begin with. And I know that this is not going to make me popular for saying, okay, I understand this episode not going to be popular at all. Certain people admire you for telling them the truth and are open-minded enough to listen, like, go ahead and make a case. Most people already have their preconceived ideas, and if it's not what they want to hear, they might listen to you, might not, depending on how open-minded they are. And a lot of people, not most, but a lot of people are just absolutely determined that, no, I have declared myself God of the universe. I will dictate my own morality, and I'm going to try to force it on everyone else. But that's not working out real well for society, if you haven't noticed. Okay, our society was much healthier when it was tethered to a morality that said, yeah, all men are created equal because all men are made in the image of God, and that gives them intrinsic worth. And also, there are limits. It doesn't mean that all actions are equal, and if you're someone who commits mass murder, you are equal in your actions and contributions to someone who cures cancer. Okay, it was not about putting on a performance or making claims in order to give what the Bible refers to as ear-tickling messages that people like to hear because it makes them feel good and doesn't hold them to account. I am holding you, and not just you, myself as well, to account here. If we're going to be Christians, you actually have to be Christian. When the rubber meets the road, you have to say, okay, there is a God, And the one thing I know with absolute certainty is that it is not me. I'm not going to hijack God's name for my cause. I'm going to treat his reputation with respect. And just objectively, this is a better way to live. To say, sure, I want to be successful, but my lack of success is not because that person is more successful than me. I mean, unless he's doing something to hold me back, unless he's putting up barriers in my way, unless he's promising me wages he's not paying, unless he's extorting money from me or taking something from me, actually doing something tangible, not like ghosts in the ether of, well, because the outcomes aren't the same, that in itself is an indication that somewhere some boogeyman exists who is sabotaging me. No, I mean, like, you got to actually be able to point to the thing. He's holding me back. Okay, how? I don't know. I'm just making the claim. That ain't going to cut it, okay? Now, if you can say he's holding me back because his monopoly, better, rather than having a monopoly on it, over in Britain, the Liberal Party is trying to pass a law that would require YouTube and other platforms to change their algorithms in order to promote state-sponsored media so that it promotes the true facts as opposed to independent media. Okay, now, like, if a person in independent media over there, you may or may not be familiar with them, but say the guys from the Trigonometry podcast, say, okay, that's holding me back because the algorithm right now rewards the state and me equally. It doesn't prioritize one of us. It's not pushing me down and lifting them up with unfair advantages just in order to promote state propaganda so that they can control the narrative. That's a legitimate beef. They're putting roadblocks in your way to success. If that's happening, and you can point to it, the way I just did, okay, well, injustices do happen. I'm not saying they don't. And when they happen, we need to fight them. The Bible is not against fighting for injustice. But you can't just say, for example, if I was to say, Trigonometry has 1 million followers. I don't have 1 million followers. That's a gap. Gaps should not exist. Therefore, you know what? Trigonometry, you have to donate part of your partners to me. 500,000. I want them right now because we should be equal. There should not be a gap. That is not a legitimate beef. They didn't take their followers from me. There's not even a reason why people can't follow more than one podcast at a time. So it's not even like by them winning those followers that I've been excluded from those same followers. They can follow me too if they so choose. I'm not entitled to there being a world with no gaps. Now, ironically, I think that the Trigonometry people would disagree with me on this, but the fact that so many podcasters and politicians are just blindly agreeing to the premise here that you do have a right to be upset over gaps. No, you don't. Not unless the gap was created by holding you down or taking from you. If it just has nothing to do with you, it was no skin off of your nose, there just is a gap, well, that's like the Grand Canyon. It's a gap. It being there did not hurt you. It did not take anything from you. It has nothing to do with you, in fact. It's been there long before you were here. It's going to be there long after you were here. It's got nothing to do with you. None of your business. And I realize we have not really raised people to be mature enough to hear that and go, you know what? Fair. It isn't my business if there's a gap. It isn't my business if Elon Musk is a trillionaire unless He took that by screwing other people over. If he did that, well, okay, then it's other people's business. But if he didn't screw anyone over to get it, he just happened to have earned a lot of money. You're right, that is none of my business. And it requires a certain amount of maturity for people to admit that there are actually subjects in the world that, sure, you can have an opinion on, but as far as being upset and resentful over it, actually not your business. I'm not going to tell you you don't have a right to free speech. You can say whatever you want. But some things that people say are wrong. And my right to free speech means that I can point that out and make a case to say, no, this is nothing but just pettiness. Today a friend was sharing a clip with me, and it had Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues in it, right? Sure, you've heard the song. The line everyone remembers from it is, I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. All right? But a lot of people don't pay attention to the very next verse. I bet there's rich folks eating in a fancy dining car. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know I had it coming. I know I can't be free. But those people keep a moving. And that's what tortures me. So, Johnny Cash actually gave you an insight here into the way a lot of people's minds work, especially a criminal mind. You killed somebody. You took a life just to watch them die. You flushed your life down the toilet. You admit, I know I had it coming. The sentence in Folsom, I know I can't be free. I know. The part I can't stand, though, as someone who has a human nature being one where misery loves company, I can accept that I've effed up my own life, but you know what I really can't stand is that they haven't effed up theirs. The Bible is fantastic in that it calls us to responsibility. Sure, it's balanced. That's what's awesome about it. It's balanced with forgiveness, atonement, charity, love, so many things. It's a perfectly balanced code of morality, which is why it is the soil that the West grew in. That's not an accident. But it calls people to responsibility with the code of morality, saying, yeah, you're responsible for treating others the way you want to be treated. Yes, you're responsible for not doing something terrible. You don't get to go up to that person and take their life. Thou shalt not murder. You shouldn't screw over your neighbor by sleeping with his wife. You shall not commit adultery. Don't take the Lord your God's name in vain. Don't you hijack my reputation for your nonsense. I'm a person too. I deserve respect. That's not okay to treat me that way. And then to claim you treat me like you're God? Really? There's something that doesn't add up in that claim. It calls us to take responsibility and go, fair. You know what? I'm guilty of that. And not in a way that's, I'm guilty of that. Pull out the whip. I will be a monk in the Middle Ages in my cell. I will come back to you in 10 minutes from now with a bloody back. Okay, it doesn't encourage that. It's not about flagellating yourself. But it is about going, fair. You know what? There is a God. It ain't me. And it ain't that person either. And all of these ideas that are leading to so much division and unrest and resentment. I mean, I would point out in the story that Jesus told us, the first group of people would have been completely happy had there been no other workers hired. They would have been paid a good wage, and they would have gone home going, I got a good wage. It was a good day. It was a good day. I'm just sitting out in the street, man, sitting out there. Out of nowhere, this perfect offer comes along. I'm in the right place at the right time. I was able to take advantage of that offer. Guy offers me a really good wage for a day's work, and I come home with money. Look at this. Look at what he paid me, man. That's what would have happened. They robbed themselves of that because they had to go, what about John? Is John going to be crucified too? Your focus on the gap is the reason why you can't see what you have. Well, I don't have a private jet. He's got a private jet. Yep. Okay. Do you have a car? I don't have a car. And that's not me being envious of you. I don't want to take your car away from you, but I enjoyed my car immensely when I had one. Do you still get to do that? And for me, look, I'll pick on me. I don't have a car, okay? I have air conditioning. That's more than the people dying of heat stroke in France right now have. And that's a European country. I mean, that's not even like getting to a third world country. That's just letting people die just for the heck of it. I can be focused on the gap, or I can be focused on what I have. And the beauty of the Bible is that it encourages you to do the second. When you're focused on the gap, your life will be filled with envy and all of the things that you don't have, and all of the supposed wrongs that are being done to you that aren't actually wrongs, but you carry them around as though they are because you've labeled them that way because you've never taken responsibility for examining, is this just or not? You live the Bible's way, you get to go around going, you know what? I had food on my plate. Got air conditioning, keeping me cool on a 100-degree day. Got to go out to eat this afternoon and, went down to Cane's Chicken. Frickin' good chicken, man. I was sitting here holding my dog, looking out at a blue sky full of clouds, fixing to take them out to play in the yard. It's a good day. It's a good day. You can be the laborer who goes home happy with a good wage. Like, I wasn't skimped on. I got a good wage, man. You could be the person that's like, out of all the places on this earth I could have been born in, I'm born in the frickin' United States of America. I can say what I want to say. Nobody can stop me. Should be responsible about that, yes. But the point is, other places, Britain being one of them, you can actually go to jail if they don't like what you have to say. Got healthcare as far as the most advanced hospitals on earth. Mayo Clinic is in my country. Texas Children's Hospital, my country. Scripps clinics out in California, in my country. New York's got a bunch of them too. Like St. Jude's Children's Hospital here. Places that people from all over the world come to. My back door. Every 4th of July, I can barbecue, have an iced tea or lemonade, sit out there, watch the frickin' fireworks, eat a slice of watermelon, watch, some frickin' awesome flybys go over. Life can either be about what you have, or it can be frickin' life. I hate it. I hate it because look what he has. He didn't take it from me, but he has it. And those people keep them moving, and that's what tortures me. I want everyone to be as miserable as I'm choosing to make myself by what I'm focusing on. I would rather you be healthy, so I'm not going to cater to a premise that right from the start is flawed. A gap is not immoral in and of itself. For the last time, if you made it by exploiting people, if you made it by taking from others, by doing them wrong, by stealing from them, fine, that's different. But if you just made it completely above board and actually you took other people with you, you gave them opportunities to become wealthy that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And my beef is just that you wound up with more than I did when I didn't do that same thing. Yes, different paths lead to different places. If I'm on the road to Tokyo, I can't be mad that I don't arrive in Rome. I mean, I know we're told all roads lead to Rome, but actually, the road to Tokyo does not lead to Rome. The road to Seattle also does not lead to Rome. The road to Cancun does not lead to Rome. Now, I mean, if someone put you in a plane and parachuted you down to the road in Cancun and stranded you there when you were on the path to Rome, okay, you have a beef. But if your beef is they took the path to Rome and I didn't, and therefore they wound up in Rome and I didn't, damn them. Okay, who is being unreasonable here? We have not raised people to think critically. We have not raised them to be responsible in their morality judgments. And we're just catering to bad premises without even going, wait a minute, the entire argument is built on sand here. Inequality in itself is not an argument. Now, if you don't have enough to live on, you can't keep shelter over your head, you can't keep food on your plate. Once again, that's different. And hey, it's even fine to talk about the problems in the workforce, the problems with inflation, all that. That's legitimate because that's taking away from you. It's taking opportunities away from you. But just saying, for instance, if inflation was hitting you and your neighbor through some magical protection, shields up Scotty sort of a thing, managed to keep inflation from hitting him a little less hard, okay, the response to that is kind of like, well, good for you, man, because over here it really sucks. Not, how dare you be doing better than me? That's not a legitimate beef. Unless he got the government to up your inflation in order to lower his inflation, okay? Unless it actually came out of your pocket, not your business. And once again, I know no one is going to like being told the truth here. Sometimes when you've been plied with sugar for too long, I got an even better example. Years ago, I was using Splenda. That stuff is super sweet, man. You know, and I'd seen commercials where it's like you just use it in equal amounts to sugar. If you do that, I can tell you from experience, sugar doesn't even taste sweet anymore. So it was kind of like a switch to go back to just regular sugar. It's like, this is not sweet. This is what we've done to people. What I'm telling you today is not actually harsh. It is the mildest of things, but when all you've been fed is fluff and cotton candy, it's kind of like, this is chewy. What do you mean I have to chew it? Like, what? Chew it? What? It's supposed to dissolve on my tongue, man, because that's what I'm used to. This is a lot of work. How am I supposed to digest this? Okay, I get it. A lot of things in life are relative based on what you're used to. That's not a crime, but the point is you are supposed to realize that. And not childishly blame other people for when your relative reactions to things are what they are. You're supposed to have the maturity to go, yeah, okay, so maybe I have been catered to with a lot of fluff a little too much. Maybe I've been coddled a little too much. And maybe that's why a mild amount of truth seems harsh when it's actually not. It's some pretty basic stuff of envy is bad, gratitude is good, mind your business, stay in your lane. This is not, Aristotle that I'm throwing at you right now, okay? It's just not. It may seem like it if you've been listening to Beavis and Butthead, but, it's still not Aristotle, okay? This is not Homer in its original Greek, like going, oh, okay, let's struggle through this. All right. There are some morality issues that get far more complicated and harder to hear than this. But I'm just not going to be one of the people that goes along with the premise that's wrong from the very start. Yes, let's lift people out of poverty. Yes, let's get costs of living down as low as we can. Yes, let's help as many people as we can. That is a different subject from the one that they're trying to slip this into without you noticing it, saying the existence of a gap is immoral, and it's actually okay to be a resentful, envious, greedy, bitter, clutching, clawing, self-interested, me, resentful person simply because of the people that have more than you, while also ignoring the people who have less than you, as though that doesn't make you a total hypocrite. I'm just not going to go along with premises that are not healthy, that are not moral, that are not actually the legitimate beefs. Now, I will join you on the ones that are legitimate, but I'm not going to go along with this. And if you're not a religious person, that's part of the advantages of being a religious person, is that you have been steeped in a framework that gives your life shape. You are not completely at the mercy of every bad idea that comes along. Now, sure, there are people that can be dogmatic about their religion to the point that they don't seem to have any common sense. I'm not advocating for that. But having a moral framework that is actually laid out and set, that has been tried and tested for thousands of years, I mean, you don't seem to oppose that when it comes to, say, practicing Buddhism or yoga or any of this sort of stuff. So why is that a bad thing only if it's Judeo-Christian? And if it's, well, there have been people who have misused it in the past. Well, yeah, that's true of everything, though. That's just it. They had to misuse it. The things that they used it for were not in the text, were not in the teaching. Most of the time, they were able to get away with that in a society that was illiterate, that had to take their word for what was in the text, like the Crusades. Okay? But Darwinism was used to justify slavery in the South. Does that mean that's it? Throw evolution out because it was used by some bad people? Used by a lot of the propaganda that was put out in Nazi Germany, too. Science was used. Totally bullshit claims that Jews actually had a different circumference of head than Aryans, and this proved something about them not being human in the same way that Aryans were human, and therefore they were actually more like a missing link than an actual person, and it's okay to exterminate them like vermin. Okay, There is nothing on the face of this earth that has not been hijacked by evil people. My question is, does the text actually teach that? If it does, then you've got a legitimate point. If it doesn't, then the fact that bad people hijacked it and were able to do that among the ignorant is not an actual argument. In fact, that's exactly what I'm fighting against right now, is people who have unfortunately been deprived of the privilege of growing up in a morality that teaches you to accept from the time that you're young, all right, fair, this one's on me. I'm the one being the jerk right now. I'm the one in the wrong. This is my attitude that is the problem. It's on me. That is one of the biggest advantages you can have in life, to holding your shape when the rest of the world is liquefying into goo around you. And if you are Judeo-Christian, as in practicing, well, then now is the time to act like it. To say exactly what I'm talking about of, okay, fair, I tell myself and I tell others that I follow Jesus Christ. These are the teachings that came directly from the mouth, not just of the Bible, but from the mouth of Jesus Christ. This is what he told Peter himself. This is the parable he told. And it happens to coincide with consistent messaging throughout the Bible. So, when I say I follow Christ, is that me just hijacking his reputation to mask my bad behavior? Or am I going to put my money where my mouth is? Am I going to tell myself a story about who I am, like Peter did? I will go to the cross with you. And then have life kick me in the teeth as the only way I can find out that I've been lying to myself? Or am I going to make a choice? That's the great thing about belief. People think it's a feeling. It's not a feeling. Belief is not, ooh, I get the tingles, I believe it. That's not what belief is. Belief is a choice. It's like love or gratitude. Gratitude is not something that you just feel whenever you feel it. Occasionally, you get a cherry on top that way of feeling suddenly overwhelmed by gratitude that you weren't looking for. But most of the time, it's a practice. It's stopping and looking around. Like, I have air conditioning. I'm grateful for that. It's hot out. It's a practice. Love is not just the fuzzy feeling you get. That's mostly chemicals. That is you being high on your own supply. And that's great. And it has value and it should be a factor. I'm not saying love should be emotionless by any means, but that's not what it is. That's more like the container it's wrapped in. Love is a choice of how are you going to treat that other person. Are you going to choose to value them and then treat them in that way? Are you going to nurture an attachment to them so that the bonds of that love continue to be there? Or are you going to leave it alone and then be surprised that it died, like a plant that you put in the corner? Like, what the hell, man, it died. Yeah, that's what happens when you don't tend to plant. I know, I've killed many a plant. Okay, I'm not good at remembering to water my plants. Okay. But same thing with love. Belief is the same thing. That's why when Jesus asked someone that he was healing, "Do you believe?" his answer was, "I believe, Lord. Help my unbelief." How does that make any sense? Because belief is a choice. It's like I'm human. Yeah, there are doubts. There are struggles. That was probably the most honest answer he could have given. It's not like Jesus didn't know that he was human. It's not like Jesus didn't know he had doubts. The statement, I believe, help my unbelief, is a declaration, I choose belief. And yes, my feelings are struggling to keep up with that choice, but I've made a choice. Do you believe that Jesus was the Son of God and these are his words? The stories that we covered today. Do you believe you're actually a follower of his? Okay, well then it's time to make a choice. And once again, I understand that in the modern church, holding anyone responsible rather than just saying, oh, it's all okay, we can all make up our own version of Jesus in our heads. We're going to pretend that that's not an idol. We're going to say that Jesus is whoever you want him to be. And usually it's you in disguise. And you can worship that, and we'll pretend that's Christianity. And he can teach whatever you want him to teach, not only when it's not what's in the Bible, but even when it's directly contradictory to what's in the Bible. That's okay. Like, we don't want to judge. That ain't Christianity. Okay? Jesus called out the Pharisees for teaching things that were not right. He held them to account. Jesus did not come here to institute some sort of hippy-dippy, everybody can make up their own whatever and call it me. That was exactly what was being forbidden by the other part of the Trinity in the Ten Commandments, the one that he was the incarnate version of, who said, don't take my reputation and carry it off like a flag for your empty cause. And yet that very practice is the entire religion of many people who call themselves Christians, and those who do take their faith more seriously than that are too cowardly to say no. Now sure, you're allowed to have your own beliefs, but you're not allowed to mask it as Christianity. You cannot take my Savior's face and Hannibal Lecter it onto yours and do that. That's disrespectful to my religion. You would not do that to Islam. You would not do that to Buddhism. You're not going to do it to Christianity either. If you want to start your own religion, you're allowed to do that. Go start your own religion. But you are not going to hijack Christianity. Christianity is an actual thing. It's defined in the Bible. If what you're saying reflects the Bible, great. If it doesn't, it's not Christianity. It is Bobism or Tonyism or Susieism. You can figure out whatever name you want for it, but it's not Judaism. It's not Christianity, because those have already been defined. We have the texts to prove it. If you want to go write your own holy text, you're allowed to do that. It's not going to mean anything to me, but you can do it. It's not actually virtuous of Christians to allow their faith to be hijacked and sex-changed, operationed into something that is not healthy, not functional, a lie, and nothing anywhere near what it started out being. That's not a virtue. Doesn't mean we have to be ugly to people, but it does mean we need to stop being so cowardly that we can't have days like this where we stand up and we say, you know what? No. These are the teachings that are in here. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to agree with them. But if you're going to claim that what you're saying is Christianity, that it's what was taught by Christ, then it has to actually be what was taught by Christ. It cannot just be whatever makes you feel good. You see this in the New Testament where Paul is battling it out with other evangelists who have hijacked the gospel and are spreading false teachings for their own benefit. Paul did not just say, well, we don't want to judge them. We don't want them to not feel included. He's like, no, you need to watch out for those people. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. They are false prophets. They are teaching false things. What they're teaching is actually dangerous. It is important to know the truth from the lie. It is important to actually follow the teachings of Christ and not a bunch of rando teachings that are getting thrown in there by Gnostics and whoever, trying to hijack Christ's name. From the very inception of the church, this has been a part of it. You have to be willing to defend your faith. And that doesn't mean you have to be ugly towards other people, but it does mean you have to be willing to at least say no. No. Our faith has been defined. It has a text on which it is based. It has a history which outlines its beliefs. And that's what it is. You're welcome to be a part. If you don't want to be a part, obviously you don't have to be. You can have no religion. You can start your own religion. You can choose an existing other religion. You have a wide variety of choices. The only thing you are not going to do is take my religion, my inheritance from the God that I follow, hijack his name, raise it up like a flag, and carry it off for your empty causes without me pointing that out for what it is and doing everything I can to snatch that pole back and put it in the ground where God staked it, based on the text that this religion is centered around. Once again, you would not do this to any other faith. I don't know why Christians have decided that it's virtuous to allow things that other religions simply just don't even go for, or why the so-called compassionate people think that it's okay to disrespectfully appropriate, to use a word that they like to use a lot, someone else's religion for your own secular nonsense. You definitely do not have the courage to do this to Muslims when it comes to Islam, because we know what would happen to you. But you don't even do it to Hindus or Buddhists, and I'm not saying you should. This is not me saying, like, why don't you go do it to them? No, don't do it to them. It's actually correct that you should not go and disrespect their faith. How are you the good guys for disrespecting mine? Not okay. You can have your opinions, you just cannot hijack Christianity to mask your opinions or to try to give them legitimacy that they don't have. I understand that it's not as impressive to say, this is my opinion, Billy Bob, this is what he believes. That carries only as much weight as Billy Bob's reputation has earned over his lifetime. Whereas if you're like, Jesus said, okay, that carries more weight. But if it's not what Jesus said, you are being incredibly disrespectful to the point of being blasphemous. It's not okay. I'm not going to be ugly to you, but I am going to call you out on it. I am going to step up and say, this is not right. It's not right to treat the faith this way. It's not right to treat God this way. It's not right to treat the other followers this way. I am asking you, human being to human being, one responsible adult to another, to do the right thing. I cannot make you. I have no intention of trying to make you. You claim that you're a moral person that respects other cultures, that respects other kinds of people. I'm asking you to be the kind of person you claim to be. Stop disrespecting my faith. You can still have all of the same beliefs, stop claiming that they are the beliefs of Christ unless they match the things that Christ actually said. And if you're Christian, it is actually a time in the history of our people, in the history of civilization, in the story of your life to decide what that means. I'm not in any way calling for aggression here. I've not demonstrated aggression today. I don't want people going on crusades. In fact, I actively discourage that. And I'm not talking about like the medieval crusades, of course. I'm talking about getting on a soapbox kind of crusade. I've been on the receiving end of that, and all that does is damage. Sat and watched a clip the other night of some woman do that to a comedian, and I just could not stop rolling my eyes. Like the way she behaved towards this man, thinking that she's being a good little Christian, representing God well in this kind of behavior towards others. It does not ever cease to baffle me how the very people who read in the Bible that the Word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword think that by throwing blades randomly through the air and taking people's heads off, that they're going to get a pat on the head on Judgment Day and a good girl. Okay, I'm going to be very surprised if that's true. When there's a sword, you actually should not wield it unless you know how to wield it. And randomly throwing blades through the air so that you can feel like a badass, so you can feel like I am the big Christian warrior as you do damage, I feel pretty safe in saying you're not going to be rewarded for that. That when there's blood on your hands, when there's wounds, they're your fault. When you did damage in God's name, all because you couldn't bother to take it more seriously than that. Yeah, I'm not going to speak for God, but I'm going to be very surprised if the result of that is, well, you sort of kind of maybe meant well adjacent. For my whole life, I've always thought that the most haunting verse in Scripture was when Jesus said, many will say to me on that day, many, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not declare all kinds of big visions and hijack your name to do it? Did we not work miracles in your name? Did we not put on a good show? All kinds of showy stuff. Hijacking your name for it. For you. And he said that the response is going to be, I don't know you. We don't know each other. You were never interested in getting to know me. You never let me get to know you. I don't know you. Depart, go away. Depart from me. Go away, leave. You workers of iniquity. People who labor for empty twistedness. If you actually take Christianity seriously, that verse should be very haunting to you. It's one that anyone could be guilty of. Nobody wants to be. Nobody wants to find themselves there on that day. And he said, many will. Like Peter, they've got an idea in their head about who they are. And it's going to have a pretty rough collision with reality. That's why I'm encouraging you today to really stop and examine when you say, am I a Christian? Is that true? Do you follow Christ? Or is it more like you follow Christ when you already agree with him, and anytime it's an issue that's hard, because you kind of see it a little bit different, really he's supposed to follow you? Now, I don't say that with judgment, because we all have those areas. I say that because it's important to say. Because it is important to evaluate these things. It is important to realize that those distinctions matter, and they might indicate a real problem. A problem where you're lying to yourself about who you are, how secure your foundation is. And that's not to say we all have to be perfect. Obviously, we're all human. We make mistakes. But at the end of the day, you are supposed to be heading in a certain direction. It's not okay. It isn't to just say, well, none of us are perfect, so I'm going to do my thing while declaring that I follow God. I won't actually follow God, but that's the part that nobody's perfect. I'm going to say I follow God. I'm going to follow myself. And that's okay because nobody's perfect. Okay, that's where there's a fundamental problem. It's like, there's a difference between that and I'm trying to follow God. I have decided to follow God. And sometimes I fall down, and sometimes I get sidetracked, and sometimes I get lost. And when that is brought to my attention, I course correct. I try to course correct. That is the goal, is course correction. It is not just, it's okay not to course correct. I'm just going to do my thing. I'm going to keep going down my path because we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. Yeah, falling short. Not, I turned my back on him and every day of my life I walked in the other direction. But I said I believe. Yeah, that Jesus said that devils believe and tremble. That ain't the kind of belief he's talking about. They know who Jesus is. I'm saying these things not to be judgmental, but because they need to be said. It is time for Christians to decide, are they Christians or are they not? To quit handing over very important teachings, very important legacies, very important amounts of credibility that have been built up over centuries to the very people that are discrediting all of it and going, aren't we good people for being inclusive enough to include things that fly directly in the face of Christianity and just allow the whole thing to crumble because we're good enough people to be that generous with something that is not ours. You actually owe it to the believers that come after you to preserve a real Christianity, for them to find. There needs to be a remnant. That red thread that runs all the way, the scarlet cord that runs all the way through the Old Testament up through the New Testament. It's a lifeline that people actually need. And if you've been privileged through unmerited grace to have been granted the ability to see that lifeline when it floated in front of you and to grasp it, not because you were better than anyone else, but purely because God is good, then it is your job to make sure that it is visible to those who come after you and not buried under several feet of slime that you stood by and allowed to be put there, allowed to bury it. We are to be good stewards of the things that we are blessed with, and the morality on which we base our view of the world is part of that. So I hope that whether you are secular, and this was merely interesting from the perspective of, okay, well, I kind of know a little bit more about the morality that is even taught in these texts, and I see a little bit more about the practical way that it functions in the life of a person, whether you are a Christian or even a practicing Jew who has allowed themselves to get off track by taking in too much of the culture, too much of the world, too much tolerance. And there are a lot of areas where tolerance is good. There are some areas where it's bad. There are some things that you shouldn't tolerate. Like the German people should not have had tolerance for Auschwitz. Okay? There are times when tolerance is bad. But if you're a Christian or a Jew, that today was not necessarily a wake-up call. I don't aspire to have the kind of gift with being such a great narrator, storyteller, public speaker, that I'm so compelling that, oh, I have given you an epiphany. But if today was just something that made you stop and think, started generating some thoughts in your own head about these subjects, or if you are somebody that was fortunate enough to have been really immersed in this consistent morality that is taught all through the Bible, that you knew these things, but like I said, the premise is just being accepted and nobody's willing to speak up because it is very clear that people do not want to hear it. They want yes men and only yes men on certain subjects, and this is definitely one of them. And you just needed a little bit of a confirmation that no, this actually is a problem, and it actually is worth speaking out for. And you know what? The very worst thing that can happen is, somebody posts a comment of how much they hate you. Ooh. Oh my. I think you'll live. I know I will. I mean, we're human beings. We like approval. Approval feels good and disapproval feels bad. We're wired that way. I'm not going to pretend like it means nothing to me, but let's have a little perspective here. I don't even know who you are on the other side of the internet. So if you hate me, I'm not the one feeling that hate. You are. Hate is the poison that consumes its own bearer, not the person that they feel it for. You've drunk that poison and you think it's going to kill me? I mean, sure, nobody likes being on the receiving end of vitriol, but I assure you I've been through worse. I've buried people I've loved. I've been through way too many surgeries and recoveries. Even did one eye surgery without any anesthesia. I can handle it. May not like it. In fact, more than may, I won't like it. I don't like being on the receiving end of conflict, but I have been through worse. It's time we stop living in fear, people. It really is. We have catered to the most fragile and have only managed to make them more fragile and everyone else several degrees more fragile in the process. It is time to realize that that's unhealthy and to reverse course. Not that we need to be hard asses with everyone, but at least I'm going to say what needs to be said. I'm going to speak the truth. Those who can hear it will hear it. Those who can't hear it will have a meltdown, and that's okay. That's not my job to worry about. As long as I'm not doing anything wrong, as long as I am not actually doing anything immoral that I need to be ashamed of, I'm not actually being cruel to them, I'm not actually doing anything, then just the fact that they're having a meltdown, there's a difference between what's their responsibility and what's my responsibility. I'm not responsible for their reactions to me unless I am behaving in a way that is immoral, in which case I'm responsible for my own behavior. But nothing I've said today is that. So if there's people that just have allergies to some simple truths or even differing opinions, I can't help that. And I'm not going to just be silent because those people exist. And we've done that for far too long. And again, some people take the exact opposite approach. They think that that means, okay, we'll just come out guns blazing and be the biggest jackass, honestly, that you possibly can be because people need to toughen up. Yes, people do need to toughen up, but that's not what that produces. That just produces resentment, and rightly so, because you're being a jerk. Needlessly so. That doesn't mean that you have to water down everything. Different situations do call for different responses. I'm not saying everything needs to be monotone in life, but once again, it's not a zero-sum game. We talked about that last time. It's not a zero-sum game where it has to be one or the other, that the only option is being a silent, capitulating coward who has everything being plundered, everything that matters being plundered and desecrated, and stands there with hands out saying, "You forgot this, don't you want to shatter this?" And being someone who is going to ride out, guns blazing, lots of collateral damage, firing off shots in every direction when nothing is happening, just to prove that they're not that first person. You know, there is a sane alternative to either option. It doesn't require, truth does not require you to be a jerk to say it. Now, sometimes truths are harsh, and sometimes they're not what people want to hear, and sometimes they're a bitter pill to swallow, and they still, like, I mean, if a doctor has to tell a patient, you have cancer, that's a hard truth to hear, man, but it's the truth, and we have to get to that truth before we can get to a cure, because how are you going to get them to take chemo if they don't know they have cancer? Some truths are hard, but there's a difference between speaking a hard truth and Like being the kind of person that would tell them, yeah, you got cancer and I hope you die. I mean, like, you didn't have to go there just to get the truth out. You could get the truth part out without doing that. So, hopefully whatever you needed to hear today was the encouragement that you got. Maybe not the encouragement that you wanted, but hopefully it was what you needed, which is better. If you know of anyone who might also get something out of this, then, feel free to share it. If you don't, that's fine too. And I hope you come back again next week. And until then, I hope that you choose to have a good week, my friends.